They said the angels would save us. They never told us what that salvation would cost. The wind carried the ashes of 1,000 homes, spiraling through the shattered spires of a once pious city. Somewhere beneath that dying sky, a child cried for her mother, and the cry was swallowed by the sound of thunder, not the thunder of storms, but of bolters, of angels, of space marines. To the Imperium, this world was a name on parchment. Eudaimon IV, a frontier agri-colony once known for its fields of golden grain and hymns that rose with the morning sun. To the Adeptus Astartes, it was a theater of war, a planet infected by heresy in need of cleansing. And to the civilians who lived beneath their shadow, it was something far simpler. It was home. When the Space Marines descended, they came like living comets, their drop pods tearing through the clouds, their armor wreathed in the glow of burning re-entry. To those below, they seemed like gods of old myth, returned from the stars to deliver judgment. Children knelt in the dust, whispering prayers they barely understood. Old priests wept at the sight of them. The angels of death had come, and for one terrible fleeting moment, hope dared to exist. But hope, in the Imperium of man, is a fragile heresy. The First Order was given before the dawn had broken. Entire districts were sealed by flame. Administratum scribes declared the city compromised, its population subject to contamination of spirit. The people didn't understand. They saw no demons, no traitors, no warp anomalies. Only themselves, farmers, workers, families. They didn't know that their world's crime was not rebellion, but doubt. And the angels had no room for doubt. A woman named Lysa was among the first to speak against them. She ran toward the Astartes convoy, waving a banner of the imperial creed, crying out that they were loyal, that her people prayed to the emperor every morning and night. The marine who met her gaze wore the white and red of the angel's vermilion. His eyes, hidden beneath a crimson visor, reflected no emotion. He raised his gauntlet, and the banner turned to cinders. To Lysa, that moment felt like the death of the emperor himself. The Space Marines did not speak much to civilians. When they did, their words were commandments, short, precise, divine. They called the people the unblooded, the frail, the forgetful ones. To them, mortals were not brothers, but burdens, vessels of weakness to be guarded or purged as necessity demanded. A serf named Jarek remembered how one marine stood outside the chapel, silent for hours. The statue of the emperor loomed before him, one arm shattered by shell fire. Jarek approached, trembling, and asked if he should help rebuild it. The marine looked at the broken face of the emperor and whispered, almost too soft to hear, "He sees too much." Then he turned away. That night, the chapel was razed. When Space Marines protect a world, it is never for the sake of its people. It is for the sake of its compliance. Their compassion is not human. It is ritual, conditioned through centuries of war. They save civilians as one might save relics, not out of love, but duty. When they look upon a child, they see not innocence, but a resource, a potential guardsman, a servant of the creed. To them, mercy is a calculation measured in munitions and purity seals. On Eudaimon IV, that cold mercy wore the face of Captain Atheon of the Angels Vermilion. His words were scripture, his will unyielding. When the first reports of infection spread, whispers of warp dreams and phantom lights in the fields, he did not hesitate. "Purge and consecrate," he ordered. "Those who remain shall be cleansed by faith or by flame." In the streets, civilians gathered in clusters, whispering prayers to the God Emperor, clinging to hope that the angels would see their devotion. Mothers painted the Aquila across their doors in ash and blood. Fathers knelt with their sons, chanting catechisms they barely remembered. They thought faith would save them. They did not understand. In the eyes of the Astartes, faith alone was never enough. The purge began at dusk. It was not chaos that came for them, but order. precision. The Marines moved through the city like the hand of judgment itself, methodical and calm. Bolters roared like lions. The smell of incense mixed with burning flesh. Civilians fled into the catacombs beneath the cathedral district, praying the angels would not follow. But the angels always follow. Brother Sergeant Malchion found them huddled in the dark. 50 souls, trembling, whispering that the Emperor would protect them. He stood among them, towering and silent, his armor drenched in the blood of their neighbors. One child dared to reach out, touching the aquila upon his breastplate. "You're here to save us," she whispered. Malchion's reply was almost tender. "The Emperor protects." Then, to the Astartes, there is no cruelty in such acts, only necessity. They do not see civilians as lives, but as threads in a tapestry far larger than mortal comprehension. Some threads must burn so that the pattern may endure. They have seen worlds fall to heresy because of hesitation, and they have sworn never to hesitate again. And yet, sometimes when the war ends, when the silence returns, one can almost sense something beneath that iron faith. A shadow of regret. On the outskirts of the city, where the ruins met the ash plains, a lone Marine knelt before a scorched doll, the only remnant of a home obliterated by orbital fire. He touched it gently with armored fingers, the motion deliberate, almost reverent. His voice, distorted through the vox, was barely audible. "Forgive us, Father," he murmured. "They were yours." Some of the chapter's mortal serfs speak of moments like these, whispers of angels who pause to mourn what they destroy. They tell of Astartes who stand vigil over mass graves, their bolters laid aside, their helms removed as if in confession. But such stories are dangerous. The ecclesiarchy calls them falsehoods. To question the angels is to question the Emperor himself. And yet, the ashes remember. When the angels departed Eudaimon 4, they left behind nothing but silence. The surviving population, less than a tenth of what once was, were gathered into camps under the watch of the Inquisition. Their city was declared sanctified, its destruction labeled a necessary purification. The official record calls it a victory, but to the survivors it was a haunting, a memory of salvation that tasted like fire. There are still marks upon the stones where the Marines once stood, scorched footprints deeper than any human could make. Priests come to bless them, pilgrims to touch them, as though the angel's presence left behind a trace of divinity. But some whisper that if you kneel there at night, when the wind moves through the ruins, you can hear something else, a low mechanical breath, a voice murmuring a prayer that no one has taught for 10,000 years. In the endless wars of the Imperium, the fate of civilians is always the same. To live beneath the gaze of angels is to live on borrowed time. The Space Marines are not shepherds. They are executioners of faith, warriors forged to preserve a dying empire that no longer remembers why it fights. And yet, for all their cruelty, for all their distance from humanity, they are still called the Emperor's finest. Perhaps that is the tragedy of the Imperium, that the saviors of mankind have long forgotten what it means to be human. Still, some secrets refuse to burn. Weeks after the angels left, an inquisitorial attaché sifting through the ruins discovered something buried beneath the old chapel. A chamber sealed with adamantine, untouched by the firestorm above. Inside lay rows of bodies, civilians, unmarked, unburned, each with a single purity seal pressed to their foreheads. On every seal was written the same word, forgiven. No record mentions which Marine ordered it. No chapter claimed responsibility. The angels vermilion departed without explanation, their banners drenched in the light of dying suns. And so the question remains, whispered in the ruins by those who still dare to hope, when the angels come again, will they bring salvation or remembrance? The wind moves through the ashes once more, carrying that question across the void, where countless worlds still kneel in prayer, waiting for deliverance that may never come. And far above, in the blackness between the stars, a figure in crimson armor stands upon the deck of a silent ship, staring down at another world soon to burn. His hand lingers over his bolter, his other upon a small charred doll. For a moment, a heartbeat, he does not move. Then the order comes through the vox, cold and divine. Commence purification. And the angels fall once more. But this time, one of them hesitates. The angels fell again. Their descent lit the sky like the breaking of a false dawn, drop pods screaming through the stratosphere, fire trailing behind them like the fingers of vengeful gods. Below, the world of Callion's Wake waited, a shrine world once radiant with devotion, now darkened by whispers. The Vox channel spoke of unrest, of insubordination among the clergy. The truth was buried beneath prayer and fear. When the pods struck the soil, the ground itself seemed to recoil. The first to emerge was Captain Atheon, crimson armor bathed in dust, his visor reflecting the burning heavens. He looked upon the horizon where the cathedrals once gleamed and found only shadow. "Purge the unfaithful," he commanded. His voice carried the finality of Scripture. "Cleanse the shrines." In the valley below, bells still rang, slow, uncertain. Priests stood upon the steps of the Basilica Magna, clutching relics that no longer shone. One of them, a man named Father Varian, dared to speak through the voxcaster to the angels above. "We are loyal, sons of the Emperor. There is no heresy here." Static answered him. Then the shriek of bolters. Brother Sergeant Malchion led the first assault through the cloisters. The stained glass shattered under his advance, raining down shards that caught the firelight like stained stars. Behind him came the purity squads, their voices reciting the litanies of purification. Each verse ended with the same refrain: "Only the faithful may burn." In the crypts beneath the basilica, acolytes hid among the bones of saints. Their prayers trembled through the dark. One of them, barely more than a boy, watched through a crack in the stone as a marine's shadow passed above. The boy whispered a question meant only for himself. "If the Emperor loves us, why does he send his angels to kill us?" The silence that followed was its own kind of answer. When dawn came, it found the city burning. Atheon stood upon the balcony of the ecclesiarchal palace, his eyes fixed on the banners below, golden eagles turning black with soot. A servitor approached holding a data slate. Reports: resistance minimal, priests compliant, civilian casualties extensive. Atheon said nothing. He dismissed the servitor, his thoughts astorm behind the stillness of his helm. In the sanctum's upper chambers he found Inquisitor Ilara Voss waiting. Her armor bore no heraldry, only the sigil of the Inquisition engraved over her heart. "You acted without sanction," she said. "The purge was premature." Atheon's reply was calm, almost reverent. "The Emperor's will needs no sanction." Voss studied him for a moment. "Or perhaps it is your own will you serve." Their gazes met. One forged in war, the other in faith twisted by truth. Neither yielded. Meanwhile, in the ashes of the basilica, Father Varian still lived. Dragged from the wreckage, coughing black dust, he stared at the bodies of his congregation. "We prayed," he rasped. "We obeyed." A lone marine loomed above him, helm retracted. Brother Lucen, the youngest of the Angels Vermilion. His face bore the faintest trace of doubt, a flaw too human for the gene-forged. "Faith is not obedience," Lucen said softly. "Faith is endurance." Then he walked away. Elsewhere, within the catacombs, a discovery was made. Tech adepts combing through the rubble unearthed a reliquary sealed by ancient code. Its sigils predated the Imperium's current era, markings not of the ecclesiarchy, but of the sigillite. Within lay scrolls wrapped in decayed silk, their script old High Gothic, faded yet legible. "The angels are not divine. They are the memory of mankind's failure. When the message reached Atheon, he stared at the words for a long time. Around him, his warriors prepared for the next purification. "This is heresy," one of his chaplains declared. "Destroy it." But Atheon's gauntlet hesitated over the flames. "Perhaps," he murmured. "Truth and heresy have long since traded places." As night fell, the world seemed to hold its breath. The burning cities glowed faintly against the horizon like candles on an altar. From orbit, the fleet loomed, the vigil of solace, its hull scarred by centuries of crusades. Within its command sanctum, astropathic hymns whispered of something unseen, a pulse in the warp, faint but growing. The choirmaster wept as she read the patterns. "The Emperor's light flickers," she whispered. "It flickers." Back on the surface, Brother Lucen wandered through the ruins alone. He found a child clutching a burned book of prayers, her face streaked with soot. She looked up at him, eyes wide with something that was not fear, something worse. "Are you here to save us?" she asked. Lucen knelt. "We are here to save what can be saved. And what cannot? We forget them." The girl nodded as if understanding, then turned away. In the command cathedral, Atheon received a message from Terra itself, a sealed transmission marked Eyes Only. Its sigil was not the Aquila, but the 8-pointed sun of the sigillites' lost orders. The voice that spoke was old, metallic, filtered through millennia of static. "Captain Atheon, the Inquisition deceives you. The Emperor does not see you. You serve the dead, not the divine." The transmission ended with coordinates, a location beneath the planet's surface. He said nothing to his men. That night, under the shroud of storm, he descended into the caverns alone. The tunnels beneath Callion's wake were ancient, carved long before the shrine world bore its name. Atheon's torchlight revealed inscriptions of the old Imperium, words so sacred they were forbidden to speak aloud. At the heart of the caverns lay a chamber of black marble, lit by a single, flickering lumen. Upon an altar sat something impossible. A sarcophagus, not of a saint, but of an Astartes. Its armor was crimson and gold, its chestplate engraved with an unfamiliar sigil, an inverted aquila. A vox recording still played within, faint and broken. "They told us we were his hands," the voice said, distant and weary, "but even the hands of a god can tremble." Atheon knelt before the sarcophagus. In its reflection he saw himself, a mirror of the fallen. For the first time in centuries he felt something like fear. Then the ground trembled. Above, the city began to die anew. Inquisitor Voss had learned of his descent. Her fleet was descending, declaring Exterminatus Protocol Primus. The angels vermilion were branded Excommunicate Traitoris. The reason? Doctrinal corruption, spiritual deviation. In the eyes of the Imperium, their search for truth was treason. When Atheon returned, the skies were already aflame. His ship, his brothers, burned in orbit. The Vox crackled with desperate voices. "They turn their guns upon us. We are loyal. We are loyal." The Emperor did not answer. Only the roar of plasma bombardment filled the heavens. On the surface, Lucen rallied what survivors he could, both marine and mortal. They fled into the catacombs, pursued by loyalist strike forces bearing the sigils of the ecclesiarchy. The war for Callion's wake had turned from purification to extinction. The faithful were now the damned. In the chaos, Father Varian emerged from the smoke, carrying a relic salvaged from the ruins, a simple chalice, half melted, engraved with a single phrase, "The Emperor was a man." He handed it to Lucen. "If you still serve him, protect this truth." Lucen stared at the chalice, uncertain whether to weep or pray. Above them, thunder rolled as the Inquisition's warships aligned for final bombardment. The voice of Alara Voss echoed across the channels, calm, unwavering. "Purge complete. Let none remain to question the light." But then the light changed. From the caverns, where Atheon had uncovered the ancient tomb, a pulse surged, blinding, radiant, defying the bombardment. The flames bent away, the air itself rippled. A single word reverberated through every vox, every skull, every soul on the planet. Remember. The bombardment ceased. The warships fell silent, and for one brief, impossible instant, the warp stilled. When the light faded, Callion's wake was gone. Where once a shrine world burned, now only dust drifted in orbit. Yet the Inquisition censors recorded something else, something beyond explanation. A new star, faint but alive, where no star had ever been. Across the Imperium, reports spread in whispers. Angels who vanished into light. A lost world reborn as flame. Priests who awoke from dreams speaking a name long forbidden. Atheon the Redeemed. On Terra, the High Lords sealed every record. The official decree was simple. Callion's wake, lost to warp instability. No further investigation authorized. But among the ranks of the angels, Vermilion who survived, scattered, hunted, yet unbroken, a new creed began to form. They called it the doctrine of the remembered God. It said that the Emperor was not a god because he ascended, but because he suffered. That salvation was not in faith alone, but in the remembrance of what was lost. And somewhere, in the dark between stars, a voice still whispers through the static of the astropathic channels. Calm, patient, eternal. They told us we were his angels, but perhaps we were his ghosts. Then the transmission ends, and the Imperium pretends not to hear. The galaxy remembers. It remembers in silence, in the static hum of the void, in the low chanting of ships that drift through prayer rather than power. After Callion's wake vanished, the Imperium did not mourn. It never mourns. It edits, rewrites, sanctifies. Whole archives were purged. Inquisitors sealed the truth beneath sigils of flame. And yet, in the whispering dark between the stars, something lingered. A rumor, a light that should not exist. In the bowels of the Segmentum Solar, aboard a pilgrim convoy bound for Holy Terra, a young missionary named Athema dreamt of angels. In her visions they wept blood made of ash, and from their mouths poured the words, "Remember." When she awoke, her cabin reeked of ozone, and her skin bore faint scars in the shape of an inverted aquila. The ship's chaplain called it divine madness. Athema called it memory. Meanwhile, on the edge of the galactic north, the angels Vermilion were reborn in secret. A dozen survivors gathered in the ruins of an abandoned orbital station, derelict, forgotten, orbiting a dead moon. They had stripped their armor of heraldry, painted it in morning black, yet beneath the surface their hearts still burned crimson. They called themselves the Penitent Sons. Brother Lucen led them, carrying the melted chalice of Father Varian as both relic and burden. He spoke seldom, prayed often. "We are not exiles," he told his brothers. "We are witnesses." His words carried the quiet of a confession. Some nodded in reverence. Others feared what they had become, not warriors, but ghosts clinging to the edge of faith. Across the Imperium, miracles turned to anomalies. Warp storms flickered with rhythmic precision, like breathing. Astropaths reported dreams of light seeping through the cracks of dead worlds. Some said the Emperor stirred, others whispered that something else was waking, something beneath the Emperor's light. In the cathedrals of Terra, high above the billions who prayed without question, Inquisitor Ilara Voss stood before the Golden Throne, or rather before the endless machinery that surrounded it. She had come seeking certainty, but the air was thick with dread. The Emperor's body, colossal, entombed in gold, was motionless. The light that once poured from his being now flickered like a candle struggling against the wind. The Fabricator General spoke in flat tones. "We have detected degradation in the Astronomican's amplitude." Translation: The Emperor's light is fading. Voss felt the weight of that silence like gravity. She thought of Atheon, of Callion's wake, of the word that had burned across her dreams since that day. Remember. For the first time in her life, she wondered if she had been serving not a god, but the echo of one. On the derelict station, Brother Lucen communed with an astropath whose mind was half gone. She spoke in riddles, her eyes blind, her veins glowing faintly with warp fire. "They say he is dying," she whispered, "but death cannot touch what has already forgotten its name." Lucen leaned closer. "Then what are we?" "You are the breath he left behind." Outside, the void screamed. A psychic storm blooming like a wound. From its heart came transmissions in impossible frequencies, voices layered upon voices, children reciting prayers backward, priests begging forgiveness for existing. The Penitent Sons fell to their knees as reality itself groaned. When the storm passed, a single message remained etched into every surface, even into the flesh of their palms. "He remembers." Lucen stared at the mark, the inverted Aquila now glowing faintly through his armor. He felt something inside him stir, ancient and cold. "He remembers," he repeated. But what did that mean? Elsewhere, Inquisitor Voss convened a secret synod in the vaults beneath the conclave of Holy Terra. Dozens of high lords and cardinals gathered in the candlelit chamber. "The Emperor's light dims," she said plainly. "We must confront the possibility that our understanding of him has become corrupted." The silence that followed was venomous. A cardinal of Ophelia VII hissed, "Blasphemy!" Another murmured, "Or truth." Then the lights died. For 13 seconds the chamber was consumed by total darkness. In that void, every man and woman heard a voice not with their ears, but their soul. "They burn my words and call it worship." When the light returned, several cardinals lay dead, eyes open, mouths bleeding ash. Voss stood trembling. On the table before her, the wax had melted into the shape of a human hand. She understood then. The Emperor was not asleep. He was trying to speak. The revelation spread in secret through the ranks of the faithful like a contagion. Priests began to question their litanies. Confessors refused to burn heretics, claiming that faith without doubt was blindness. On shrine worlds, icons began to bleed. In the void, ships vanished mid-prayer. The Adeptus Mechanicus declared it all warp interference. The ecclesiarchy called it testing. But among the quiet, among the broken, a new prayer emerged. He remembers. Lucen led his brothers toward the coordinates burned into their palms. A barren world called Muriel's End, a place erased from all records. There, beneath its glassed deserts, they found ruins of impossible architecture. Pillars that seemed older than time, marked with both imperial sigils and something else. A circle of stars devouring a sun. In the central chamber stood a figure waiting. Not human, not machine, but something between. Its eyes burned white, its voice echoing through their armor. "I was his hand once," it said. Before he forgot himself, Lucen approached, his bolter trembling. "Who are you?" The figure smiled, a human smile stretched too wide. "I am what you called an angel. Long before you learned to kneel, I am what he took from himself to build you." The Marines felt their hearts pound like war drums. The figure stepped closer, touching Lucen's helm. He needed soldiers, not sons. He tore divinity from his flesh and sealed it away. And in that moment, he ceased to be a man, but never became a god. You, his angels, are the fragments of what he lost. Lucen staggered back, the weight of it crushing. "Then we are not his servants." "No," the figure said gently. "You are his memory." In that instant, every battle, every purge, every moment of faith and fire unfolded before Lucen's eyes, a galaxy weeping beneath the shadow of its own salvation. He saw Atheon standing before the sarcophagus, the light that consumed Callion's wake, the word forgiven carved into the brows of the dead. It was not judgment, it was remembrance. And yet, above them all, the Emperor's light flickered once more, not in weakness, but awakening. On Terra, alarms blared through the sanctum of the Golden Throne. Servitors screamed binary hymns as the Astronomicon flared to life, brighter than it had been in millennia. The Fabricator General fell to his knees. The throne is consuming power, containment failing. Voss ran toward the chamber doors, her rosarius burning against her chest. The air shimmered like liquid fire, and from within the throne, for the first time in 10,000 years, came breath. The Emperor inhaled. Every psyker in the galaxy screamed. The warp convulsed. Worlds cracked under invisible pressure. The voice that followed was not divine. It was human, tired, infinite. I remember. Lucen felt it too, his armor splitting at the seams, light bleeding through his flesh. His brothers fell to their knees, weeping. The figure before them dissolved into radiance. It begins again, it whispered. The god forgets, the man remembers. The Astronomicon blazed brighter still, and across the Imperium the faithful saw visions. The Emperor walking not as a corpse upon his throne, but as a man of flesh and sorrow. In his eyes burned not holiness, but grief. He spoke one truth to all who could hear. You were never meant to serve me. You were meant to awaken me. Then the light shattered. The Golden Throne fell silent. The Astronomicon went dark, and for the first time since the birth of the Imperium, the galaxy stood without its guiding flame. Panic consumed the stars. Fleets collided, warp routes vanished, planets turned feral. In the void, the Penitent Sons drifted, half blind, half holy. Lucen stared into the blackness where the light had been. He remembered, he whispered, and now he's gone. But deep within the warp, beyond the screams and storms, something stirred. Not the Emperor as they had known him, but something vast, something awake. It was neither God nor man, neither light nor shadow. It was the sum of all that had been forgotten: faith, doubt, mercy, pain. And from its depths came a voice both familiar and new, echoing through every soul that had ever prayed. Now, you will remember too. The stars trembled, reality bent, and the Imperium, once eternal, once unquestionable, began to dream. In that dream, the angels of death rose once more, their armor cracked and luminous, their hearts no longer bound by creed. Lucen looked upon his reflection in the void and saw not a warrior, not a servant, but a man. And behind him, in the endless dark, a figure smiled with human eyes. The Emperor had remembered himself, but what awoke beside him was something the galaxy had forgotten how to name. And far across the stars, on a forgotten shrine world reborn from dust, the word forgiven burned once more, not as absolution, but as warning. The age of faith had ended. The age of remembrance had begun. The galaxy did not wake gently. It screamed. Planets once held in orbit by faith alone tore themselves apart under the strain of a vanished light. Warp routes collapsed into silence. Fleets drifted blind. For 10,000 years, the Astronomicon had been the pulse of humanity. Now that pulse had stopped, and every world felt the cold of its absence. In the ruins of Muriel's End, Brother Lucen stood beneath a sky that no longer knew how to burn. His armor, fractured by light, now carried faint veins of gold beneath the black. Around him, the remaining Penitent Sons gathered in uneasy prayer. None dared speak the Emperor's name. Not anymore. They prayed instead to memory itself, to what they had lost. Lucen stared at the stars, motionless, cold. "We have freed him," whispered one of the brothers, "and damned ourselves." Lucen did not answer. Somewhere deep within him, he still heard that final whisper. Now you will remember too. It was not a command. It was a curse. On Holy Terra, the void above was darker than it had ever been. Without the Astronomicon, billions of pilgrims found their prayers swallowed by silence. The ecclesiarchy decreed a new litany, the Vigil of Shadow, to mask their terror with ritual. But inside the sanctum beneath the palace, Hilara Voss knew the truth. She had seen the Emperor breathe. She had heard him speak. And she knew that if he had remembered himself, then he no longer needed their worship. She moved through the halls of the dying Imperium like a ghost, her rosarius dim, her eyes hollow. The High Lords argued in whispers. The Mechanicus wept before machines they could no longer hear. "The Omnissiah is mute," murmured one Magos before burning out his own optics. Voss touched the wall of the throne's antechamber. It pulsed faintly like the echo of a heartbeat. "He is not gone," she said softly. "He is waiting." Across the void, the storm came. The warp boiled with fury. The Immaterium, once chained by the Emperor's light, now surged through cracks in reality. Demons whispered to astropaths offering sight for faith. On hive worlds, preachers turned to madness. Some cried that the Emperor had ascended anew. Others claimed he had become the enemy of man. And through the chaos, the Penitent Sons heard a signal. Faint, familiar, a sequence of tones that pulsed like a heartbeat. It came from the edge of the Segmentum Pacificus, from a world long erased from imperial maps. Athion's world. Eudaimon the Four. Lucen stared at the signal in silence. His gauntlets trembled. The last time they had walked upon that world, it had burned beneath their own hands. Now it called to them through the dark. "Perhaps the dead remember better than the living," he said. The others waited for orders. None came. Only the hum of the void and the slow turning of a forgotten planet in the dark. When their ship descended, it found no atmosphere, no cities, no signs of life, only a desert of glass. And yet beneath the surface, the Auspex detected structure. Architecture buried under aeons of ash. Lucen ordered descent. The cavern they found was vast and alive with whispering light, pale, spectral, like memory itself taking form. At its center lay a statue, colossal, half-buried. It was the Emperor, but not as he was known. The face was human, sorrowful, scarred. Beneath his feet an inscription carved in the old tongue. "I was never a god. Only a man who remembered too much." The Marines fell to their knees. Lucen approached the base of the statue, tracing the words with armored fingers. "He built his godhood from our forgetting," he murmured, and when he remembered, the illusion broke. A soft sound echoed through the chamber. Not machinery, not the wind. A heartbeat. It came from the stone itself. The light around them began to twist, threads of gold and crimson weaving through the air. The statue's eyes flared, not bright but deep, endless like the night between stars. "You carry my sin," the voice said, not through air but through thought. "You who burned in my name. You who killed in my silence." Lucen fell to one knee, helm lowered. "Then free us," he whispered. "Freedom is the wound," came the answer, "and you are its blood." The cavern shook. Outside, the planet's crust began to crack. Reality folded as warp and matter intertwined. The Penitent Sons fired bolters into ghosts, praying through static. "What is this?" one shouted. Lucen knew. "The truth," he said. "It was never faith that sustained us. It was guilt." The statue fractured, light spilling from within. In that instant, Lucen saw visions. Not of the Emperor enthroned, but of a mortal man walking among the ruins of a pre-imperial age. He saw him weep over fallen soldiers, smile at children, hesitate before war. Humanity had made him eternal by refusing to let him die. And now, as he awoke, their faith became his chain. In the warp, the storm screamed louder. The gods of chaos stirred, sensing the shift. They had feasted on worship for millennia, on hatred disguised as devotion. Now, the source of that feast flickered. For the first time, they felt hunger. On Terra, Voss stood before the throne one final time. The light around the Emperor's corpse was gone. Only shadow remained, and yet in that shadow she saw movement. Fingers twitching, eyes flickering beneath a dead man's crown. "My lord," she whispered. The lids opened. Gold met gray, and in that quiet she heard words that made her soul bleed. "I am tired." The words rippled through reality. On 1,000 worlds, statues cracked. On 1,000,000 altars, candles died. Lucen heard them too, echoing through his helm. "He does not want to be worshipped," Lucen breathed. "He wants to rest." The Marines around him fell silent. "Then what of us?" one asked. Lucen looked to the breaking sky. "We were made to serve a dream. Perhaps now we must become its ending." The ground ruptured. From beneath the planet's surface, engines of forgotten design began to awaken. Catacombs of pre-imperial machines igniting with a low, thunderous hum. The air filled with the scent of ozone and tears. "This is not a tomb," Lucen said. "It's a memory core." Holograms flickered to life. Cities reborn in light. The Imperium as it had once been. United not by faith, but by hope. Children laughing beneath banners of gold. Soldiers fighting for each other, not for gods. The vision burned into their eyes, unbearable in its beauty. "He remembered what we lost," Lucen whispered, "and we killed it." The warp howled as if in denial. Reality convulsed. The angels' vermilion felt their flesh dissolve into radiance. Not death, but translation. They were becoming what they had once been intended to be. Not executioners, but witnesses of mankind's sorrow. Lucen raised his hand, light pouring through the cracks of his armor. "If he must rest," he said softly, "then we will stand watch." Above, the storm reached its zenith. The fabric of the galaxy trembled. On Terra, the throne's machinery began to melt under divine heat. Voss fell to her knees as fire and light consumed the palace. The Emperor's last breath shook the foundations of the world. And in the echo of that breath, every soul in the Imperium heard one final whisper. Not command, not benediction. "Remember what you were." Then silence. Ships fell quiet in orbit. Bolters stopped mid-fire. The warp stilled, as if afraid to move. The universe itself held its breath. Lucan stood at the edge of the breaking world, his form dissolving into starlight. He looked back once, toward the shattered statue and the memory it guarded. "This is not the end," he said. "It's the pause before truth." Above him, the sky began to split, light and shadow converging, creation folding in upon itself. Across the galaxy, suns flickered like dying candles. And somewhere beyond time, the Emperor of mankind, no longer God, no longer corpse, opened his eyes to the void and whispered to it like an old friend. "Now, let us see what remains." And time stopped. The moment time stopped, the galaxy forgot how to breathe. Stars hung suspended like frozen tears. The void trembled, unbound by gravity or faith. For an instant too brief to name, existence became thought, and thought became remembrance. Every life that had ever burned in the Emperor's name, every prayer whispered in terror or devotion, flared into being. It was not light that returned, but memory. On the broken world of Eudemon IV, Brother Lucen awoke within that stillness. His armor was gone. The ceramite had dissolved into ash. Around him, his brothers knelt, not in worship, but in awe. They no longer wore the mark of the Aquila, but the imprint of light upon flesh. "Are we dead?" murmured one. Lucen shook his head. No, we are seen. The air shimmered with ghosts, echoes of every battle, every massacre committed in the Emperor's name, civilians crying in the mud, planets burning under orbital fire, children praying to angels who never came. The memories poured into Lucen's mind like molten glass, reshaping his soul. He saw himself through their eyes, not as savior, not as soldier, but as the hand that brought ruin in the name of salvation. He fell to his knees. "We thought we were mercy," he whispered, "but we were fear." From the fissured sky descended shapes of impossible grace, figures wrought from light and shadow, fragments of the Emperor's essence made manifest. They were neither human nor divine, but the sum of both, reflections of what mankind could have been before belief turned to tyranny. "You remember now," one said, its voice woven from sorrow. Lucan raised his gaze. "Then tell me what we are." "Remnants," the being replied, the echo of a god's regret. Above, the heavens split open. Terra's light reached them, golden, searing, and full of pain. The Emperor was no longer bound to the throne. His consciousness stretched across reality like a wounded sun. His gaze fell upon Eudaimon Thur, upon Lucen and the Penitent Sons, upon the monument to all his failures. And with that gaze came truth. Across the galaxy, psychers screamed as visions poured into their minds. The Emperor as he truly was. Not a god of judgment, but a father of a dying species, desperate to preserve them even as they destroyed themselves. The Imperium's cathedrals cracked under the weight of revelation. The ecclesiarchy's hymns turned to silence. In the black ships, captives broke their chains as the warp stilled, weeping not in madness but understanding. On Terra, Ilara Voss stood amid ruin. The golden throne had collapsed into molten slag, its machinery drowned in fire. From the flames, a figure walked forth, not radiant but human, scarred, bent by time. His eyes were not of gold, but of dimmed sunlight, weary and infinite. The Emperor had returned, not as god, but as man. The custodians knelt in shock. "My lord," one whispered, trembling. He raised a hand, and silence fell like snow. "Do not kneel," he said. "You have carried me too long. I would walk again." Voss approached, tears burning her face. "What will become of us?" she asked. "What always becomes," the Emperor replied. "You will choose." Meanwhile, the storm that was the warp began to die. The gods howled, their feasts ended. Khorne's throne cracked beneath its own skulls. Slaaneish's laughter faded to a whimper. Tzeentch's schemes unraveled into nothing. Nurgle's garden withered in despair. For the first time in 10 millennia, the Imperium starved. But the void abhors peace. In the silence left behind, something new began to stir. Not a god, not a demon, but the collective will of mankind forged through pain and unity. It was faith without chains, sorrow without cruelty, hope without blindness. It had no name yet, but it looked upon the Emperor and did not worship. It understood. Lucen felt it rise within him, vast and terrible in its gentleness. "He is not our God," he said softly. "He is our reflection." One of his brothers, broken and luminous, lifted his gaze. "Then what of the Imperium?" Lucen looked to the horizon, where the last cities burned quietly in the dusk. "It ends, and something else begins." The sky fractured again. From orbit, the remnants of the Imperial Navy rained fire upon Eudaimon Thur. The High Lords, blind in their fear, had declared exterminatus upon the world, branding it heretic and corrupted. Voss's pleas to stop were lost to the void. The Emperor, watching from the cradle of Terra, closed his eyes. Lucen turned to his brothers. "So it comes to this," he murmured, "the old faith devouring its children one last time." They stood together as the first fire fell. Orbital bombardments tore the heavens apart, glass turning to flame, mountains collapsing into molten seas. But the Marines did not run. They stood in the light, unarmed, unafraid. Their prayers were no longer to the Emperor, but to humanity itself. To remember, to rise, to endure. As the world burned, Lucen saw them. The civilians they once had saved and slaughtered, rising like phantoms from the dust. Faces of those forgotten, eyes filled not with vengeance, but quiet forgiveness. They reached out, and the Marines felt warmth instead of pain. "You were never gods," they whispered, "but you were ours." Lucen felt his heart break open. "Then forgive us," he said. "There is nothing to forgive," came the reply. "Only to remember." The light swallowed them. For a moment all that remained was silence. Then, from the ashes, a pulse. Slow, steady, alive. On Terra, the Emperor's body flickered. Not vanishing, not dying, but scattering like starlight into the void. His voice, weary and endless, spoke one final time. "The Imperium is not my dream. It was my prison. Let it fall. Let mankind wake." The words echoed across every world. Fleets halted mid-battle. Titans ceased their march. Astartes removed their helms, weeping in the ruins of their faith. For the first time in 10,000 years, humanity looked not upward, but inward. The ecclesiarchy burned its own cathedrals in mourning. The Inquisition turned upon itself, lost without judgment. The Mechanicus uncovered the truth, that the machine god had never spoken, and yet their devotion had built wonders nonetheless. Each of them, in their despair, glimpsed something greater than dogma, the possibility of mercy. And across that endless night, worlds began to rebuild, not in the Emperor's image, but in their own. Children painted new banners, not of gold and black, but of dawn and dust. The Aquila became a symbol not of empire, but remembrance, a quiet monument to what once was and to what must never be again. Yet not all could accept it. Some refused the truth, branding it heresy. Entire chapters swore oaths to reclaim the old faith, to restore the God they had lost. Civil wars erupted in the dark. Humanity's rebirth came not as peace, but as struggle, fragile, painful, real. Lucan stood among the ruins of Eudaimon IV, the last survivor of his chapter, his body half light, half matter. Around him, the air shimmered with the breath of the newborn warp, no longer a storm, but a sea of reflection. He felt the Emperor's presence, faint and fading, like the warmth of a dying sun. "What now?" he whispered to the sky. "Now," the voice answered, soft and distant. "You live." Lucen closed his eyes. He saw visions of what might come, mankind walking beneath unbroken skies, not as slaves of faith, but as keepers of memory. And beyond that, the stars themselves shifting, alive once more with purpose. He smiled, weary and human. "Then let it be so," he said. The horizon flared one final time. Light swept across the galaxy, washing away the last shadow of divinity. When it faded, all that remained was the sound of wind. On Terra, Elara Voss stood upon the broken steps of the palace, watching as the sun rose over the dead city. In her hands she held the remnants of a shattered Aquila. She placed it upon the stone and whispered, "We will remember." Somewhere beyond the veil of time, a voice, neither divine nor mortal, echoed in answer. "That is enough." And as the new dawn broke, the galaxy, ancient, wounded, infinite, began at last to breathe again. The galaxy moved again, but slower now, as if every star, every dying sun, every drifting shard of memory had learned the weight of silence. There were no hymns left to sing, no banners left to raise. The age of gods had ended, and in its absence, the universe exhaled. Eudaimon IV no longer burned. Its surface had cooled to glass, reflecting the newborn constellations above. The Penitent Sons were gone, their ashes scattered across the plains like silver dust. Only Brother Lucen remained, or what was left of him. His armor had fused into the soil, his flesh become light. He stood still beneath the quiet heavens, the last witness to an empire's death and a god's mercy. He no longer felt pain, only the echo of memory. The voices of those he had saved and slain lingered in the air, no longer in torment, but in peace. They whispered through the dust, soft as wind over marble. You remember now. That is enough. Lucen looked toward the horizon. The sun rose there, not golden as before, but pale, fragile, like the first light of a forgotten dawn. It did not blind him. It simply revealed. Cities once burned by orbital fire now stood as empty skeletons, their bones softened by moss and time. In their silence there was forgiveness. He took one step forward. The ground did not break. The world did not resist him. For the first time, he walked not as a weapon of faith, but as a man, a remnant of a species that had learned to weep without shame. He reached the remnants of a cathedral, its spires broken, its icons shattered. Only one fresco survived, half buried in ash. The emperor, not enthroned but walking among mortals, his hand extended, his face human. Lucen touched the faded paint. The surface was cold, yet alive. You were never far, he whispered, only hidden by what we made of you. The wind shifted. From the horizon he heard the hum of machines, faint, distant, enduring, survivors rebuilding, children laughing. The Imperium had ended, but mankind had not. In the ruins of empire they had begun to dream again, not of conquest or immortality, but of living. Lucen smiled faintly. Perhaps this is the true crusade, he said, to learn how to be small again. Far above him, the void rippled. A faint shimmer spread across the stars, the last trace of the Emperor's essence now diffused into the cosmos itself. He was nowhere and everywhere, in the breath of the wind, in the warmth of starlight, not watching, not judging, simply being. The god had become the universe, and the universe at last was at peace with itself. On Terra, the palace lay in ruin, half buried beneath centuries of dust and the slow reclamation of nature. Vines climbed its marble bones. Birds nested in the ribs of fallen statues. The throne room stood open to the sky. There, Elara Voss recorded her final entry. Her voice was soft, trembling but steady. The Emperor is gone. Not dead, not ascended. Gone, like a story whose ending has been spoken, but whose echo still lingers in the soul. The Imperium, as we knew it, is no more. In its place there is something quieter, smaller, kinder. She paused, looking up at the endless expanse where the Astronomicon once burned. We were told that faith was strength, but perhaps faith was the cage. Maybe belief itself was the weight that broke him. She dipped her quill again, writing slowly, carefully. If he could see us now, I wonder if he would recognize us. Not as his children, not as soldiers, but as survivors. Outside, the sun set over the ruins of Terra. Its light spilled across broken statues and shattered stained glass, scattering fragments of color across the dust. Red like blood, gold like memory, blue like forgiveness. The city did not mourn. It remembered. In the deep void between stars, where the warp had once screamed with madness, there was calm. The immaterium had become a mirror, reflecting the hearts of those who dreamed within it. No gods, no demons, no torment. Only thought, drifting like echoes of old prayers. And sometimes within that silence travelers claimed to hear a whisper. Remember what you were. Centuries passed. The children of humanity spread again, their ships smaller, their ambitions quieter. They no longer built cathedrals to the divine. They built gardens among the ruins of their wars. They named their colonies after the virtues they once forgot: mercy, solace, eudaimon. And upon one such world, beneath a sky untouched by storm, a monument stood, simple, unadorned, a single line carved into its stone. He was not a god, but a man who tried to save us. Below it, offerings of flowers and candles burned, not in worship, in remembrance. An old remembrancer knelt there, writing by the glow of her lantern. Her hair white, her hands trembling. She had spent her life chronicling what came before, trying to understand what it meant to live in a galaxy without gods. "Perhaps," she murmured as she wrote, "we were never meant to be saved, only to learn." She looked up at the stars, vast, quiet, indifferent, and beautiful. Maybe that is what he wanted, not for us to obey, but to see, to remember the cost of becoming more than human, and the grace in being nothing more. Her pen hovered above the page. "When faith dies," she whispered, "what remains? Is it freedom or loneliness? Or are they the same thing?" No one answered. Only the wind moved, carrying her words into the night. Somewhere far beyond, where light bends and memory fades, the echo of the Emperor's final breath still lingered. Not as command, not as prophecy, but as truth. The truth that mankind was never meant to be perfect, only to endure, to keep walking through the ashes, to build again, to remember. The remembrancer closed her book. "Let this be the final record," she said softly. "The Imperium is gone, but humanity endures, and perhaps that is enough." She rose, leaving the monument behind. The candles flickered in the wind, their flames dancing like souls unchained. The stars above shimmered faintly, as if the galaxy itself bowed its head in quiet remembrance. In the vast silence of the void, the Emperor's voice, faint as starlight, soft as the sigh of eternity, whispered one last time, "Live." And then, nothing, only peace. Only the hum of creation beginning anew. The chronicle ends there, in silence, in light, in the knowing that what was lost will never return, and what remains will always remember. If this story moved you, like the video, share it with others who still remember the light of the Imperium, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe for more stories from the edge of eternity.